Catus Maximus here again. This time I'm reviewing and comparing deburring tools as well as hand reamers. Now these are just for the hand reamers. We'll just go ahead and start off with those. I have a few different models. I always kind of pick these up when they're uniquely labeled, like this one, which is from Denmark. It's actually pretty rare to find Denmark-made tools. We have this, I believe, is actually was sold as U.S. General, but it is a Japanese-made hand reamer, and you can see they're similar to machine reamers. They just have some, usually 6 flutes. They're actually pretty thin, and they have a long taper, and they're just mainly for deburring holes and that type of nature. I'm not sure what the real intention of this Denmark-made unit is, but it does seem to work for making a bit more of a rounded edge when you're working with soft materials and larger holes versus these, which are real tapered. And then I do have a Craftsman one here, and it's actually pretty interesting because they have USA actually stamped onto the reamer itself rather than the handle. But it's just the same thing, just a little bit easier to use than this Japanese version. This Japanese version, you actually, I mean, it's a hit or a miss, because sometimes you may like just using it if you're working with plastics by hand, or you have to use this little cross handle here to get a little bit more leverage, say if you're trying to ream out steels. These things can be resharpened, but it is very difficult on a hand to do a hand grinding job unless you really have a setup to really guide it along very evenly. Although these are the type of thing like a saw blade shop could resharpen. This thing right here is actually a Corona. This is sold as a sharpening tool for, you know, your garden tools, for hedge trimmers, that type of stuff. Maybe machetes and the little clippers. Some of them aren't so little, for tree branches. And this one's kind of interesting because it has just a brazed piece of carbide that has some pretty sharp edges. And I guess the idea is you just go across and it just cuts off any of the real burrs and kind of scrapes it along. It makes kind of a coarse sharpening, but I found it to be a little bit more useful as a deburring tool, especially on harder steels. This piece of carbide is actually pretty nice. These other sets here are a set of U.S. General, and these are kind of nice because they have pocket clips. You can just keep them in your pocket, and then they're different colors, so that they can demark different tips. You can, of course, interchange the tips in all these. You just rotate the collar this way, and then the tip pops out. It has a little detent in it. The tips aren't standardized between all deburring tools, such as this Mango, which uses a different tip style. But getting on to these, what's nice about these type of more modern deburring tools is that they have a swivel, and they always spin very freely, and they have different types, like this one, which is a tight edge. And you can also see that it's ground offset, so it'll cut more aggressively when you're going one direction than when you're going another, and it's something to be aware of. And then here's more of the what would be considered the standard tips. They tend to have little ball ends, so it's hard to actually cut yourself, but you have to be careful on the inside edge because it is sharp. And we do have some different styles. We have one that's just ground evenly or symmetrically, and then we have a couple here. One, I believe, is cobalt, and the other one's a standard high-speed steel that are cut on an offset pattern. And then I have a more premium grade. This is a Shaviv Mango 2, and this one is pretty nice just because it has a little cap in the back where you can stuff a couple of, where it will hold a couple of the reamer tips, or it's just a big cavity in there. You could fill this up with 50 different tips if you're doing a lot of, excuse me, not reaming, but deburring. You can just fill the inside of this up with a ton of those deburring tips and be able to work for, you know, a week straight, which is kind of nice. It also spins very freely, but it does use a kind of a interesting system. You can draw this tip out, and it can actually be used in a more high access fashion with the tip extended like this, but it's a double locking. So first you have to extend this, and then that allows those little detents right there on each side. You can see them pop out to release, so you can release and replace the tip. You can see these are much shorter, and so these aren't compatible with the Generals, and the Generals are too long for this. So that's always kind of the disappointment, is they're not standardized. There is a general category of tips. It's just kind of interesting that there still is different versions, and you just pop the tip back in and then retract that, and then it stays locked really solid. What I do like about the Shviv is you can see, there we go, now you can see that it floats really freely. It's a very free-floating, very low-friction deburring tool. So let's do some deburring operations here. Say with the hand reamers, it's kind of nice, you know, if you drill a hole and you just want to get rid of the edge, I just have a little key here. You just put this in and you just run this around a little bit. You don't have to press that hard because it's pretty aggressive, especially in this, even in this brass, it's really going pretty fast and easy. And then what we have is we have just, it just does a real light deburring, just knocking any sharp edges off. Now we'll get on to some of these deburring tools. So we have a couple different materials. We have a big piece of copper here, and then we have a piece of UHMW, so ultra high molecular weight plastic, commonly known as recycled milk jugs. UHMW plastic is really one nice thing is you can just get it in pretty much whatever cross sections you want. Super duper thick. It is very durable and cost effective. The durability of this plastic is really just unbelievable, and it's commonly used as guides. Say if you are at a sawmill where there are chains that are dragging logs, those chains are riding on these replaceable UHMW wear surfaces. They're used in recycling equipment and garbage trucks. It's actually, once you kind of get an idea, it's not always green, it's black, different colors. But once you get used to it, you kind of start to notice that, wow, this UHMW plastic's just used everywhere. So we have a chode of copper here, and that literally is a chode of copper. And we'll go ahead and just use this Shviv. We do have some kind of nasty rolled over edges right there, so let's go ahead and get rid of those. You just take a deburring tool and just go along. Oh, it's really biting in a little more than I expected. The soft copper. Ugh. There it goes. And if we try to do it the other way, like this, it's less aggressive. And I hope I'm getting that. So when I'm going this way, where the flat side, come on, camera, where that flat side is against whatever I'm trying to deburr, it bites in really hard. That's why it was so difficult, but it took a really big chunk out, so you kind of know that. And then if you want to go with lighter deburring, then you just would flip it around so where the beveled edge is against the surface. So now I've removed the big chunk of it, I can go along like this, and then it glides. It's taking much less aggressive of a cut, and I'm able just to deburr it in a real controlled fashion here, just like this. And that's all deburring is just going along and removing burrs, any little sharp metal edges that you're not into, and this is just all it takes. These little tools are pretty nice. It took me a while to learn how to use them properly, just because you're wondering why when I use it some ways it just seems to bite in heavily, and when I use it another way it seems to act more normally, and that's because you need to be careful because most are offset. That is why this particular US General here is ground evenly, is because it will give you a light cut whether I'm going this way or I'm going that way. And so generally speaking, I do like these style tips, but it always seems that this style right here is the more common version. And what I've done a bit of is run a large multicam 8-foot by 14-foot CNC router. And the multicams are real industrial. They're like a milling machine, just with a super high speed spindle, and cutting out a lot of this stuff and having to deburr all the plastic. So we'll use this Corona just to kind of give a demonstration. I don't have any good examples of hardened steel to kind of show how this works, but this one can be used in either direction. Basically, you can just use it to kind of roll over an edge a little bit if it's just too sharp. Or you can use the sharp edge, and it's a little funky to use, but it does actually work to do light deburring, and just the fact that it's carbide allows you to deburr real hard metals, where these other deburring tools like these and these generals up here you have to put in quite a bit of effort, and it wears out the blades pretty fast, where this will last a whole lot longer, and they even include like a little handy cover for it so you don't chip up the piece of carbide. But using these types of deburring tools on things like UHMW is just amazing, because you can just go boom and you get a nice little curl, boom, a nice little curl, and then you actually have a real nice beveled edge. Everything looks and feels real nice. You just go around each side like so. We come this way to do that, and let me zoom out a little bit. You're not even getting a very good view, but it can be real fast when you get used each side like that, and then you know you've got to nick both of these ends just like so. We've got a real big burr along there. It works great for that, and it just peels that right on off of there. Boom. Pull those things off, and you just draw it on both sides and then finish it off like so. Get those little hangers off of there. And now we can really see that on plastics, those deburring tools just work great. Just nice, soft, rounded edges. This is exactly what a customer would be expecting when they receive a product, is just a nice, smooth, beveled edge. It's amazing how fast these work and how they can make it look like you actually ran a chamfering bit over the piece of plastic, when no, you just milled it out at 20,000 RPM on a CNC router, and then just spent a few minutes deburring all the parts. And it's kind of nice. And you run the router, and then you do some deburring, and you get all these neat little curls of plastic. Anyway, that was the end of this video about deburring tools and hand reamers. Until next time, or excuse me, if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to the Catus Maximus channel. And to all the people who have subscribed and my new subscribers, I really appreciate the support. Until next time, this is Catus Maximus out.